Welcome to the JAMODI podcast, where we interview coaches and leaders to find out not just what they do, but how they do what they do. Becoming the best version of ourselves is JAMODI, just a matter of doing it. How does culture drive performance?
You know, that's culture's it's kind of a buzzword these days, but I think it's a buzzword for a reason. And when I think of culture, I just think of identity, and that as a basketball program or football program or team, I think it's really important the identity that you choose. And you know, I feel like we're as coaches a lot of times we're guilty of maybe chasing too many things and trying to be good at too many things. And you know, I love Don Meyer, and something that he always said is you can get all the great ideas, you just can't use all the great ideas. And we've really tried to narrow down our identity to 3 or 4 basketball things every year, 3 or 4 aspects of the game, and 3 or 4 values that we want to live by. And you know, I think the more narrow that focus is, the better chance you have of actually getting the kind of culture that you want and getting the kind of team you want. And so I think, you know, that's one of the cool things about culture is you get to kind of choose what you want to emphasize and what you want to be great at. And I think your program at Faith is a great example of that. Like, if somebody were to come to your practice or watch your teams play, they would very quickly understand what your culture is all about and what your identity is. And, you know, I think if that's something we all need to ask ourselves is if somebody were to come step into our gym and watch one of our practices, would they be able to tell what our identity is and what our culture is?
That's a great point. What were some things this year that if you do you choose those values every year? Is it based on kind of what your players or coaching staff come up together, or do you have a set standards that from year to year don't change?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I think you're going to have, you know, there's a couple things that stick out in my mind that I may get into a little bit later that are going to be the same every year. And you know, I think one of those things is what we call relentlessness, or just an every play mindset. And like I said, I'll touch on that later, but that's something that's never going to change. But I do think there are maybe some aspects of the game that might change year to year based on our personnel. And that's maybe something that's a little more specific to high school, because our players that come through our programs change.
You and I don't recruit.
That's right.
Don't recruit, yeah.
That's right. And so, you know, you can't control the players you have. You can only control how you develop them and what you emphasize. And so, yeah, some of those things do change from year to year. But I think your values and your culture, you know, those things are going to be pretty constant.
Hey, you know, you guys do such a great job of showing off that word relentless. Like even the way that when it's after halftime, you know, some teams they'll talk for a second or they'll walk into the locker room. Your guys run from the bench to the locker room and they run back. How do you go about in those little things teaching that kind of relentless culture?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it kind of goes back to being able to develop an identity, and that's one of those small things that is I would say is a non-negotiable for us. Like you're gonna stand up on the bench when somebody comes out of the game. You know, you're gonna run on and off the court, and we try to really identify what are the non-negotiables, and let's not have too many of them to where we create all this work that we maybe can't really be consistent in. I think if you start picking a whole bunch of things, it's really hard to be consistent. And so, you know, that's something that maybe I've matured a little bit as a coach, and letting a couple things go that I maybe didn't care about as much, and saying, you know what, I'm not going to beat the players down with that detail because I don't think it matters quite as much as this thing. I'm going to make sure the kids know what our identity is and make sure they know what our non-negotiables are. And that happens to be one of them.
Yeah, that's a great point of there's hundreds of things that we could nitpick about if we wanted to. But then you just end up, you get players that are confused, that have too many things going on. They don't even know the clear direction that you want them to go. So I think that's a great point, that you choose the things that are most important for you to emphasize. And that culture, you can see from watching your teams play, they live it out.
Well, I appreciate that.
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the JAMODI podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.